Hey guys, Mortorcus here. So yesterday we saw some troll cards getting revealed, and as we expected, today we saw Trundle get revealed for Legends of Runeterra in this new Call of the Mountain expansion. So let's hop into it and see what's going on with Trundle and the other cards surrounding him, and I'll give you my impressions on all of them. So Trundle is a 5 mana, 4/6 with regen, and when I'm summoned, create an Ice Pillar in hand. The level up condition is I've seen you play Ice Pillar. Obviously, a very simple level up condition, not very complicated at all. When he gets leveled up, he gains Overwhelm, and every time he attacks, grant me +1 attack for each 8+ cost card you behold. So behold is when you either have such a card in your hand or in play. So obviously the Ice Pillar would be there when that happens. And any other 8+ mana cards you'd have in your hand would help in giving him more attack in these situations. So the Ice Pillar itself is 8 mana, because it does trigger a lot of these 8+ mana cost behold triggers for your other troll cards and stuff like that. It's vulnerable 0/8, and when you play it, you refill 8 mana, so it actually effectively costs you 0 mana, but you do have to make sure that you reach turn 8 or 8 full mana crystals before you're able to play it. So that's like the main thing. It's not that they want you to spend any mana on it. They just want to make sure that you don't get the chance to play it and level up Trundle early. So once you do play it, on the play and every round start, give the strongest enemy vulnerable this round. So Trundle is he's a well statted regen minion for 5 mana. He's very similar to Garen in that way. Garen's a 5/5, 4/5 that regens. But 4/6 is a better stat line because health is more important than attack in most cases. Especially once he leveled up, he gets the Overwhelm, and you can expect to get some extra attack, so it kind of balances that out. But the initial body is definitely very solid. You're going to be able to make really good trades and stuff like that. And it's only a few turns, 3 turns from when you play him to when you play the Ice Pillar, generally speaking, unless there's a bunch of mana being manipulated along the way to change that around. The fact that you have a Overwhelm regen minion that has quite a lot of stats on its body, it's going to be very powerful, and the fact that the Ice Pillar is there, it's vulnerable, so it can be taken out pretty fast once your opponent is on the attack, if they really have time to even be dealing with it. But when you're actually playing it, and every round that you are on the attack and it's still there, it means that you can use it or anything else to pull that largest thing out of the way so Trundle can go directly face. And that seems really good. Or just if you want to make it vulnerable so Trundle can just smack it and take it out and then just regen all of his stats back, that's also a really effective way of doing it. So either way, it gives you that flexibility of either moving it out of the way of Trundle for lethal with the Ice Pillar, or putting it in Trundle's way so they can take them out. It's a little bit flexible in how it lets you deal with this strongest enemy and stuff like that. So I think he's going to be really solid. I think he's very simple and basic, and you could probably just shove him into any Freljord deck without really needing to worry too much about what you're doing with it. Like, obviously, you'd hope that you get to behold more 8+ cost cards once he's leveled up and trying to gain more stats, but that's not super important. Just having this like card on its own, I think, is quite good. So I think Trundle is going to be very good. I think the fact that you get this ice pillar that can trigger beholds for your other cards is going to be very good too in behold decks and things like that, though I don't think this has to be in those decks. And I think a lot of these cards, as we're going to be looking at them, just because they all have similar mechanics that make sense thematically, does not mean that they're all going to make it into the same deck. But yeah, I really like Trundle. I think he appeals to me in his design for sure, and I'm definitely going to be playing him. Then we have Ice Quake, which is Trundle's champ spell. 8 mana slow spell. Give all units -3 attack this round and deal 3 to all units. So this is 1 less mana than Ruination. But instead of killing everything, you are dealing 3 damage and weakening their attack. I don't think that's super worth it for 1 less mana. Obviously, you don't always get to have Ruination in your deck because it's a different region. But at least that comparison, it looks very unfavorable. I guess it might be a little better with all these regen minions, so like you don't have to clear your own regen minions out of the way, because a lot of these trolls do have regen, and regen is seeming to be quite an important keyword in Freljord in general after this the set that we're going to be having. So it kind of like deals with all of the smaller stuff, and then all of the bigger stuff gets weakened so that it's not going to be as big of a threat. So you do this like, hopefully your opponent doesn't open attack, and then you do it like right before they do go for their attack. I don't think that it's very appealing anyways, though. Like, it's fine, but you think like Avalanche deals 2 to everything, and that's 4 mana. This is 1 more damage for 4 more mana, and then you get this -3 attack, which is also affecting your units. So like even when you're like trying to block against your opponents who are gonna have less attack, you're also having less attack. All of it's like not really evening out very well. So I don't expect anyone to really run this in a deck. The only way I really see running this card is if you were in some sort of Freljord control deck that doesn't have access to like anything better in terms of board clears, but I really can't think of anything like that. Like, I think in most cases you'll have better options, you'll have different ways to build that you won't want to be running this. Like, it's just so ineffective versus like 1 more mana for Ruination, and you're getting so much more out of it. It doesn't reach that point, and because it costs so much, it kind of has to reach that point. If it did like 4 or 5 damage, I'd be down for it, but it doesn't. So it is Trundle's spell, so you are gonna get it sometimes when you have your Trundle, and I think that's kind of fine for the behold triggers, because you know it's an 8 cost card. It's definitely not going to be the one you're picking for your behold normally when you're building a deck, but it's fine for a behold trigger if you have a Trundle on board already, and you'll sometimes be able to make it work. It's just not going to be as mana efficient as you really want it to be, but sometimes you just need a board clear, and your opponent's board happens to not go over 3 health, and then you're happy with it, right? You might wish it was an Avalanche instead, but this will have to do if that's all you have sometimes. So yeah, very underwhelming card, but not every card can be good. Then we have Revitalizing Roar. 7 mana slow spell. Pick a unit in your hand to reveal. Heal your Nexus by its power. And Enlightened is reduce its cost to 0. So this card reminds me a lot of the card in Ionia, which is 7 mana, heal 7, draw 1, I believe. I'm not even sure what the card's name is, honestly, because, I mean, in terms of healing cards in the game, it's not one that anyone ever considers using, or in any other capacity ever considers using. So this one is often going to heal you about 7. Normally, in most cases, I'd say you're going to be picking a unit with 7, 8, maybe 6 on the low end if you have to, about that much amount of power, right? So that's very comparable in that way, and then you're not getting your card draw. So it's worse than that in that case. But if you're enlightened, then you're getting to reduce its cost to 0, in which case it becomes a lot better, because now you're getting to do it on the same turn that you're playing something big. So maybe something like a Tryndamere, so you're healing for 8, and then you're playing your Tryndamere for 1 cheaper. It's just that you have to do it across 2 actions, the healing part and then the actual playing part. So if it's enlightened, it seems quite good. I think that would be very strong in a situation where you do need the healing, like against burn and stuff like that. It's just going to be very dependent on whether you can expect to ramp up to 10 mana in time for it to really matter. Because by then you might not really need the healing anymore, because you're already kind of screwed, you know what I mean? So I'm not really sure how I feel about this one. I think it's going to be very meta dependent and very dependent on just how fast we're ramping with this deck that you're running it in. We do have now, we have Wording Stones, we have this new card, which is the faces of the old ones, and we have the Catalyst of the Aeons. So that's a lot of different ways to ramp in Freljord. So it might be pretty consistent to be able to get to 10 mana a few turns early. Though the Wording Stones and the faces are temporary and might get removed. So that makes it a little bit even more still awkward with the Enlightenment and everything, right? So I don't necessarily think this is going to see a lot of play. I think it's definitely going to depend on whether or not we're going to need that health in the meta that we're in. And then you're like, if we are in such a fast meta where you are taking a lot of damage, then this whole like trying to ramp and stuff and falling behind that early isn't going to look too great. You'll probably have to combine it with a few other healing cards, and this is like on the upper end of your healing cards. Either way, even if it does see play, I don't think it's going to have a huge impact. I think it'll just be barely making it into decks, if it ever makes it into any decks. But I don't have high expectations of it actually seeing play anywhere. Just because we already know how hard Enlightenment can be and how much that it's gonna suck without the Enlightenment and all that, so yeah. And the next one we have is Augur of the Old Ones. 6 mana, 5/5 with Overwhelm and Regen, and play effect if you behold an 8+ mana cost card, grant an ally Overwhelm and Regen. So this guy has Regen and Overwhelm. The thing you're giving has Regen and Overwhelm. Obviously, Regen and Overwhelm are 2 very strong keywords. And the fact that you can give it to anything is crazy. There's a lot of really good options out there that we could think of. Like, Vi is absolutely nuts with it. And you're often going to be want to be worrying about 5 drops because you're going to play this on 6. So like Swain is really good. I saw a little bit of people talking about maybe Tarkaz is a card that no one really plays now, but could totally make sense if you needed some really good 5-drop to use it on. because it does have like, it's a 5/8 and it's doing AoE and all that kind of crap. So those all seem like great ideas. You could use it on like Lee Sin or something maybe if you feel ambitious. It's just that Lee Sin comes down later, so then you have to kind of, your curve is getting a little thrown off there a bit. But even if you hit something smaller with this, you're still going to be pretty happy to get a Overwhelm regen on it alone. So like baseline, it's just really good, and anything beyond that is just like totally nuts. The only real thing that might hold it back is this Behold, maybe being a little bit difficult to trigger. And it does have kind of anti-synergy with Trundle, being Trundle already has Overwhelm and Regen once he levels up. Even though Trundle will be giving you your 8-cost card for the Behold. But you don't necessarily have to play this perfectly on curve. You could play it on 7 after you play something else on 6 or something like that. Who knows with that? Like, the main thing is once you do make this happen, it's going to be really good. And I think, like, if you're running a few, like, higher cost spells and things like that, it'll definitely be very easy to trigger the Beholds and still have them be playable pretty early without having to be dead cards, because you can just use spell mana. So yeah, I really like this card. I think this card is going to be huge. I think it's going to have a massive impact on the meta. I think that this card is one of the best cards we've seen this expansion so far. Then we have the cards from yesterday. We saw Faces of the Old Ones, 2 mana, 0/2, round start. If you behold an 8+ cost card, get an extra mana gem this round. So this is straight up a Wording Stones with 2 less health for 1 less mana. Kind of makes sense that way. But you need to behold an 8-cost card, or 8+ cost card, for it to have the Wording Stones effect. That does seem really iffy. The fact that you can get it down on 2 is certainly better than 3, even though it is squishier, which may be important. But I think the fact that you could potentially get a 4-drop on turn 3 versus getting a 5-drop on turn 4 is a lot more impactful. I think that will definitely have a big impact on the situation. But it's also like, the longer the game goes, the higher the chance you get to your 8+ cost cards. Like, once you draw them, they're obviously staying in your hand for a while. But by turn 2, you might not have drawn them yet, and that might be what's holding this back a bit. And keeping them in your hand is not going to feel great in a lot of cases. So having to hold on to it just so you can trigger this is not going to be something you really want to be doing. I think if you're just trying to ramp and get to your bigger stuff faster, I think you're going to want Wording Stones over this, because Wording Stones is going to stick around longer. But for this one, I think it's not really the same intention with this one. I think the intention with this one is just to get a quick acceleration of tempo, get like your a little bit bigger stuff down a little bit faster, and then once it's gone, you'll just get back on curve as normal again. And I don't really know if that really makes a lot of sense. I think you're normally, in that case, fine to just play stuff on curve and try to do that. I think it's really going to depend on where your power points are in your mana curve, but I really don't think that hitting your 4 manas like one turn earlier is really going to be the big difference. And this sticking around for 1 extra turn doesn't seem super likely, and just conditional and everything. I think Wording Stone just does it better. I don't think hitting the ramp on turn 2 is really going to be that impactful. If it was obviously granting you a gem or something, that would be much more important, but it's not doing that. So if you're just getting a temporary mana gem, this isn't going to be a big deal. People barely run Wording Stones anymore anyways, or any deck around that, but I think it might get more popular soon, but I think that one's going to be much more appealing than this, and Catalyst of Aeons. When you have this many options for ramp, you can't run all of them. They're going to be dead cards in the late game because they do literally nothing. Literally nothing. It gives you no benefit except for block. So, if you're going to have some dead cards, they might as well be better dead cards. So I think generally we're going to be sticking to Whirling Stones with Catalyst as our ramp cards. This one's not going to. Then we have Troll Scavenger. 2 mana, 1/3. When I'm summoned, if you behold an 8+ cost card, grant me +3/+0. So this is a really strange one because 2 mana, 4/3 is decent. It's 1 mana ahead of the curve, I suppose. It's like pretty well statted for a 3-drop offensively if you're trying to pressure your opponent. But then you are also having to have your 8-cost card in your hand early. Same as I said with Face of the Old Ones. It's going to be a bit difficult to have it that early on turn 2. And the main thing, I think, with these decks is that I don't really think we want to be having turn 2 plays anyways. I think you normally want to pass turn 1, pass turn 2. Now you have spell mana for turn 3. I don't think this will fit in the same decks that the other stuff around this really do. I think maybe there's a place where you manage to have your 8+ cost cards that like you just have a perfect number of them, that you have enough consistency with this, and it's some sort of tempo deck that runs like Battle Fury as a finisher or something like that. But that sounds really weird and really iffy. I really don't think that's going to work. I think for what it's doing, that trigger is not going to make any sense. I think you're just going to want to be saving spell mana instead of playing this. So I think this isn't going to see any play at all. I may be wrong. There may be some weird deck that I can't think of, but I just don't think I don't think it's a good enough payoff for the awkwardness that you're gonna have. Like, if you have to play this as a 1/3, you're losing that game. Let me just tell you that much. You're going so far behind, wasting a whole card and 2 mana, and yeah, we're not doing that. Then our next card is Trollravager. 4 mana, 3/5. When I'm summoned, if you behold a 8+ cost card, grant me regen. So we're seeing more and more regen in Freljord, especially with a lot of these trolls. They're very regenerative. That's a word. I think a 3/5 on 4 is very good. Not as good as a 4/5, obviously, but if it gets the regen, it's going to be great. It's hitting about the same time that Braum would hit. At this point, it's a little weaker than Braum because you're not having the Challenger, and you're not summoning a 3/3 Overwhelm. But you are having attack right off the bat. And if you're not running Braum in the deck, then it doesn't really matter how it compares to Braum anyways, right? I think just having a lot of regen guys in your deck, like you got Trundle, you got this, you got Augur, if they all go in the same deck, your opponent's going to have a lot of trouble trying to figure out how to make trades with these guys. Sometimes these things with regen are just going to need big combat tricks or removal to be used on them just to get rid of them. So they're eventually going to run out of all that stuff. So I think the more regen guys you have in the deck, the more pressure you're putting on your opponent to make trades really hard for them. So I really like that. I think a 4 mana 3/5 coming down on curve with regen would be really good. I think by turn 4, you're more likely to have drawn your 8+ cost card. And I think if you can trigger it, it's going to be great. If you can't trigger it, well, 4 mana 3/5 isn't the worst thing in the world. But you're going to hope that it's going to be quite consistent that you're actually getting the regen off, so you can always have that ready to go. So I think it looks very good in one of these Behold decks. I think if you get that balance right, then it's going to be very strong tempo tool to keep you in the game and put pressure on your opponent. And I will definitely be playing it with my Trundle deck. Then we have Uzgar the Ancient. 8 mana, 7/7 with Challenger and Regen. So I heard a few people talking bad about this card right after it got revealed, saying that it's very comparable to Savage Reckoner. I think that's a terrible comparison, because Savage Reckoner has 4 health, this has 7 health, and regen, like, I mean, I know Overwhelm is going to be good in some cases, but the regen is going to be really good in this case. It's like, kind of think of it as if you had a Braum that was already buffed, and that's kind of what this is, because it's got Challenger, and it's got regen, and it's got stats in an abundance. Obviously not super great stats for an 8-drop, but the Challenger and the regen, obviously those keywords are going to have to cost something. So with this guy, you're going to be challenging something, regenning, challenging something, regenning. It's going to be big enough that you'll be able to challenge most things and take them out and not have to lose him. So, I mean, it is pretty late to start doing something like that, but it is certainly a way to close out a game. Braum, when he's like in the in-between stage after you've buffed him but before he levels up, he's basically the exact same situation, right? And like, you know how hard that is to deal with. Like, when you go into a combat, the player with the Braum can gauge, is there enough mana for them to take out my Braum if I make this trade? Then maybe I make a trade with one of the other guys, that kind of a thing. That way you can keep him going and he just regens back every time and is very powerful. So I think he's a lot better than some people were saying he is. He's still slow though. He's still very slow, and I think in most cases the Behold cards you're going to want are going to be spells, so you can play them with spell mana. But I still think you might run 1 or 2 of these guys just as something to close out a game, especially if you ramp to it. Getting this down maybe turn 6 or something like that, that is a lot of pressure for your opponent. It's going to need some big combat trick removal, the same way a lot of these regens are going to need a big combat trick removal to get rid of them. So I kind of like it in a ramp deck for sure. And if you were to make a War Mother's Call deck these days, this might be an inclusion that you want to go for, because it's one of those big guys that you can get down and is really going to have a huge impact once it's there. So I don't know about other Behold decks necessarily, but definitely if you're trying to ramp and running ramp cards, this guy's going to make sense in a ramping deck, just because you can get him down a little bit earlier and he's going to start causing a lot of friction for your opponent. Then we have Troll Chant. 2 mana burst spell, give an ally +2 health and give an enemy -2 power this round. So this is nuts. This is Elixir of Iron. You add 1 mana to it, and you get basically a reverse Elixir of Iron. Instead of giving the health to you, you're taking that attack from them. And it kind of has the same impact in a lot of cases. So this seems insane. You go into one combat with 2 guys, and you can potentially save both of them. For just, like, you might even not want to be running Elixir of Iron at this point, because Elixir of Iron has been a huge staple for Freljord decks. And now this, you're just adding 1 extra mana, and you can shift 2 combats instead of 1. You can protect 2 units instead of 1. Or or you use it both on the same combat, and it's effectively a double Elixir of Iron. You're getting 4 health back because their attack's going down and your health is going up. That's a 4 health differential. So it's got that flexibility. You can use it anywhere in the combat. You can swing 1 combat harder or swing 2 combats in a medium size. I think it's just going to be such a strong tempo tool and combat trick for like every Freljord deck. You're going to want this all over the place. I think it's freaking amazing. I think this is one of the best cards we've seen. Definitely when you can compare it to a card that's getting played all the time in like the best decks, it is definitely looking good. Alright, and the last Freljord card we have today, because we do have a couple Targon cards after. This one is Call the Wild, 3 mana burst spell. For the top 4 cards in your deck, draw each Yeti, Poro, and Elnuk, then shuffle the rest into your deck. So, playing this with Poros seems inconsistent. Playing this with Elnuks seems inconsistent. Playing this with Yetis seems somewhat consistent to some degree, because we do have cards that can shuffle Yetis onto the top of your deck. But the way that you'd be doing it, you'd go like what? You'd go Trapper on 3 and then play this, and then you draw 1 Yeti? That doesn't seem great, right? You'll just draw it eventually anyways. So maybe you play Trapper on 3, Trapper on 4, and then play this? But what if you drew the Yeti that turn? Drawing Yetis with this also seems pretty awkward. We don't have a lot of other ways to get Yetis going. Maybe if there was more Yeti synergy would make sense. So if none of the 3 of them are going to work, then maybe you make a deck with all 3 of them, which sounds like a total meme of a deck. But maybe it's possible. Maybe you just run like Bull Elnuks, which aren't the worst. They're like a regularly statted minion, and you're just throwing it in there so that you can make your draw more consistent with this. And you have a few Poros there and a Poro deck, and then you got like your Trappers and maybe the Baby Yetis and stuff like that. But even then you're like, I don't know. Like, if you're drawing 3 or 4 cards off of it, that's really great. But if you're making your deck really bad, just so you can do that, that's not going to be something you want to do. So, I don't think this is ever going to be a competitive card, not unless we see a lot more support for any of these archetypes, or all of these archetypes. So, for now, with what we currently have in the set, and, well, all the sets, I don't think it looks very appealing as a card. It's just going to be a meme card. And that's totally fine. It's totally fine to have meme cards like this. It's a very interesting and cool idea, and I'll probably try at some point to make it work. Then for our last 2 cards, we have a couple of Targon cards. This one is Broad-Backed Protector, 4 mana, 2/7. Round start, heal your Nexus 3, deal damage to me equal to the amount healed. So that is quite a stat line. It is very aimed on the health side of it, obviously because you want it to trigger a lot. That is effectively 9 healing altogether if he lives through all the turns. So 4 mana heal 9 seems really good. Obviously, he could get removed along the way, but it also means that you can just attack with him and stuff if you don't expect to be blocked or anything. But in a burn meta, where you expect to be taking a lot of damage throughout the game, this is a huge swing. Like, turn 5, you're getting 3, turn 6, you're getting 3, turn 7, you're getting 3. And against burn strategies, that can have a huge impact. You can also just block some stuff along the way, and that might heal you even more than the amount that it's going to heal you, because maybe once it's down to 1 health, you block like a 5/5 or something. Who knows? I think it looks very solid if you expect to be taking that much damage. That's going to be very meta dependent. If we're not expecting to take any damage by turn 5, then this won't really make as much sense. But it's a great healing option, I think. And I think we've got... we're going to have a decent amount of healing going on in Targon if we have this and the next card that we're going to see. So, you know, no one's going to run this if they don't need the healing. No one's going to run it if burn aggro strategies aren't a thing. But I expect that there's going to be at least a little bit of that in the meta. Maybe you run one of these if it's not super prevalent, just in case. But in more damage-heavy metas, this is going to be hugely impactful on keeping you alive, and potentially just shuts out decks like that, because they just won't have the amount of damage that they need after they've reached that point in the game. And the last card is Resplendentstella Horn, 5 mana, 4/5. Play, heal an ally and your Nexus 3. So 3 healing to your Nexus, 3 healing to an ally. Healing to the ally can swing your board a little bit tempo-wise, and having a little bit more Nexus healing is always a good thing to have. It's not too poorly statted for 5 mana. You're like making it 1/1 less than you'd like for a normal 5-drop. So again, this is probably going to be based on whether you really need the healing, though this one's a little bit smaller and it heals allies. So I think this one's going to make more sense if we're not in a heavily burn type of meta. You'll probably be damaged by turn 5, so a little bit of healing wouldn't be too bad. So I think this could fit in a few different places, as long as you need some sort of healing in your deck. This is probably where you're going to go, unless the other region you have has a better option, like in Freljord. You're probably still going to go for Tavern Keeper instead, potentially. But you never know. This one is like hitting the ally and the Nexus, so it's a little bit flexible in that it's doing 2 things at the same time. So both these healing cards, very dependent on how burny the meta ends up being, but I think they both look very good as healing options, and Targon's looking like a good healing region already after just these 2 cards. Alright, so that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please leave a like if you did. Comment down below what you think of Trundle and all the Behold and the trolls and all of that in general. And even the Targon healing cards that we saw today. And please subscribe if you'd like to see more of my content in the future. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it so much, and I'll see you guys in the next